The air in Marco Vitale's penthouse office was thick with the scent of expensive leather and unspoken power. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence that had fallen the moment I'd placed the worn photograph on his polished mahogany desk. His piercing dark eyes, usually cold and calculating, were now wide, fixed on the faded image. The black rose tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse with a sudden, raw energy, and the spiderweb designs on his fingers, usually a symbol of his intricate control, now trembled almost imperceptibly. I watched his jaw clench, a muscle twitching beneath his smooth skin, and a gasp, barely audible, escaped his lips. It wasn't a sound of anger or even surprise, but something far deeper, something akin to profound shock, laced with a grief I couldn't yet comprehend. The man who commanded an empire, whose name struck fear into the hearts of many, was suddenly, utterly vulnerable, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before my very eyes. I had come seeking answers, a desperate orphan clutching a single clue to my past, but I had stumbled upon a secret that threatened to unravel not just my life, but the very foundations of his. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, as the weight of that single photograph settled between us, a silent testament to a truth neither of us was prepared to face. Hello, my darlings. This is Rachel Ashwood, and tonight I have a story that will grip your soul and refuse to let go. Imagine a world where loyalty is currency, and secrets are buried deeper than any grave. Our tale tonight is one of an orphan, a powerful mob boss, and a single photograph that shatters everything they thought they knew. It's a journey into the heart of New York's underworld, where love, betrayal, and an impossible truth collide. Prepare yourselves for a narrative so intense, so emotionally charged, that you'll feel every tremor, every heartbreak, every shocking revelation. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell, like this video, and share it with everyone who loves a good drama. Now, let's see how a simple picture brought a formidable man to his knees and changed 2 lives forever. New York City, a sprawling metropolis of steel and dreams, where towering skyscrapers pierce the clouds and shadows lengthen in the labyrinthine streets below. It's a city of endless possibilities, but also of hidden dangers, where power is wielded by those who operate just beyond the reach of the law. In this modern jungle, Marco Vitale, at 34 years old, was a king. His empire, built on generations of cunning and ruthlessness, stretched across the 5 boroughs, its tendrils reaching into every facet of the city's pulse. He moved with an almost predatory grace, his impeccably tailored Italian suits, often a dark charcoal or deep navy, a second skin that spoke of authority and wealth. His jet-black hair was always slicked back, a perfect frame for his piercing dark eyes that missed nothing, saw everything. The black rose tattoo on his neck was a stark declaration of his allegiance, a symbol of beauty and death intertwined, while the intricate spiderweb tattoos on his fingers hinted at the complex, inescapable network he commanded. He was a man of few words, but each one carried the weight of an unspoken threat, a promise of swift, decisive action. On the other side of this glittering, dangerous world was Sophie Chen, a 26-year-old orphan, navigating the city's harsh realities with a quiet strength. She was a nurse, her days filled with the quiet heroism of caring for others, her nights often spent in the solitude of her small apartment, haunted by the unanswered questions of her past. Sophie was beautiful. Her striking features, high cheekbones, luminous dark eyes, and a cascade of raven hair, often drawing admiring glances, though she rarely noticed. Her resilience was born from a lifetime of fending for herself, a determination that burned brightly beneath her calm exterior. She had no family, no connections, only a faded photograph and a desperate hope that it held the key to her identity. The city, for all its grandeur, had offered her little comfort, only a constant reminder of her isolation. But a chance encounter, a whisper of a name, had led her to the one man who might hold the answers she so desperately sought, a man whose world was diametrically opposed to her own, yet now inextricably linked by a single, fragile thread of fate. Their paths, once separate, were about to collide in a way neither could have ever anticipated, setting in motion a chain of events that would challenge the very fabric of their existence. Before we continue, drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from and what you think Sophie is about to uncover. The air in the waiting room of Vitale Industries was thick with an almost palpable tension, a silent testament to the power held within these walls. Sophie sat on a plush leather sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the worn photograph a small, comforting weight in her pocket. The office, located on the upper floors of a sleek modern skyscraper in Manhattan, exuded an aura of understated luxury. Polished marble floors reflected the soft glow of recessed lighting, and abstract art adorned the walls, each piece undoubtedly worth more than her annual salary. A stern-faced man in a sharp suit, his earpiece barely visible, had led her through a maze of silent corridors, past doors that seemed to guard untold secrets. She had expected opulence, but this was different. It was a fortress disguised as a corporate headquarters, a place where every detail was meticulously controlled. Her heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but her resolve remained unshaken. She had come too far, endured too much to turn back now. This was her only lead, her last hope. Finally, the man gestured towards a heavy, dark wood door. "Mr. Vitale will see you now." Sophie took a deep breath, pushing down the tremor in her hands, and stepped into the inner sanctum. Marco Vitale's office was even more imposing than she had imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panorama of the city, the concrete jungle stretching endlessly beneath a pale afternoon sky. He sat behind a massive, dark wood desk, his silhouette framed by the cityscape. He didn't look up immediately, engrossed in a document on a tablet, his fingers, adorned with those intricate spiderweb tattoos, occasionally tapping the screen. The room was minimalist, yet every item, from the custom-made ergonomic chair to the subtle scent of expensive cologne, screamed power and precision. A sleek, black Mercedes S-Class was visible in the parking garage below, a testament to his status. When he finally lifted his gaze, his dark eyes, sharp and intelligent, met hers. There was no warmth, no curiosity, just a cool assessment that made her feel utterly exposed. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly smooth. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" His tone was polite, almost detached, yet it carried an undercurrent of authority that was impossible to ignore. Sophie swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "Mr. Vitale," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I apologize for intruding, but I believe you might be able to help me." She reached into her pocket, her fingers brushing against the familiar edges of the photograph. The tension in the room ratcheted up a notch, the air crackling with unspoken questions. She knew she was treading on dangerous ground, entering a world she didn't understand, but the desperate need for answers propelled her forward. This was her moment, her only chance to unlock the mysteries of her past, even if it meant facing the most powerful man in the city. Sophie's hand trembled slightly as she withdrew the faded photograph from her pocket. It was a small, sepia-toned image, creased at the edges from years of being handled, yet the faces within it were still remarkably clear. She walked slowly towards the imposing desk, her eyes fixed on Marco Vitale, who watched her every move with an unnerving intensity. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of city traffic, a muffled symphony of urban life that seemed miles away from this isolated, powerful space. She placed the photograph gently on the polished surface of his desk, sliding it across until it rested directly in front of him. "This," she said, her voice a little stronger now, "is the only thing I have from my past, the only clue to who I am, where I come from." Marco's gaze dropped to the photograph. His expression remained unreadable for a moment, a mask of controlled indifference. He picked it up, his tattooed fingers carefully holding the delicate paper. The image showed a young woman, strikingly beautiful, with a gentle smile, holding a baby. Beside her stood a man, his arm around her, a protective, loving gesture. He was handsome, with a strong jawline and eyes that seemed to sparkle even in the old photograph. It was a picture of a happy, young family, frozen in time. Sophie watched him, her breath held captive in her chest, searching for any flicker of recognition, any sign that this man, this powerful, enigmatic figure, knew the people in her only memento. The seconds stretched into an eternity, each one amplifying the suspense. Then, it happened. A subtle shift in his posture, a barely perceptible stiffening of his shoulders. His eyes, which had been scanning the faces in the photo, suddenly narrowed, focusing intently on the man's face. A muscle in his jaw twitched, and the black rose tattoo on his neck seemed to darken, as if absorbing the sudden shock that coursed through him. He didn't speak, but the air around him changed, becoming charged with a raw, visceral emotion. Sophie saw it then, a flash of something profound in his dark eyes. Not just recognition, but a deep, unsettling familiarity, laced with a pain that seemed to pierce through his carefully constructed facade. Who gave you this?" he finally asked, his voice a low, guttural whisper, completely devoid of its earlier composure. The question wasn't directed at her, but seemed to be torn from the depths of his own memory, a desperate plea for understanding. Sophie felt a surge of hope, mingled with a growing sense of dread. "It was in my baby blanket when I was left at the orphanage," she explained, her voice trembling slightly. I've carried it my whole life. I heard a name, a rumor, that the man in this picture might have had connections to your family, Mr. Vitale. That he might have been a Vitale. The revelation hung in the air, a fragile bridge between their two disparate worlds. Marco's grip on the photograph tightened, his knuckles turning white. He looked up at her, his eyes now filled with a storm of conflicting emotions, shock, disbelief, and a dawning, terrible understanding. The connection was undeniable, the truth undeniable. The man in the photograph was not just known to him, he was a ghost from his past, a figure he thought long dead, whose reappearance now, through this young woman, threatened to shatter everything he had built. The emotional connection was palpable, a silent scream echoing between them, binding them together in a destiny neither had foreseen. The revelation of the photograph and the unspoken recognition in Marco's eyes had opened a Pandora's box. The man in the picture, Sophie's father, was not just a distant acquaintance. He was Marco's older brother, Antonio Vitale, presumed dead for over 2 decades. Antonio, the prodigal son, the one who had defied their father, the former boss, and disappeared without a trace after a brutal internal power struggle. His disappearance had been a wound that never truly healed, a dark stain on the family's history, and Marco, then a young boy, had been told he died in a tragic accident. Now Sophie, Antonio's daughter, stood before him, a living testament to a lie, a secret that had been meticulously guarded for years. This wasn't just a personal shock, it was a monumental complication for the entire Vitale empire. Antonio's supposed death had solidified Marco's path to power, eliminating a rival claimant to the family's throne. His reappearance, even through his daughter, could destabilize everything. The immediate obstacle was the sheer secrecy surrounding Antonio's fate. The old guard, those who remembered the brutal power struggles, would see Sophie as a threat, a potential catalyst for renewed conflict. Marco's position, meticulously cultivated through years of strategic alliances and ruthless decisions, was suddenly precarious. He had inherited the mantle of leadership, not just through blood, but through proving his strength and loyalty. Now, the ghost of his brother, embodied by Sophie, threatened to expose the fragile foundations of his reign. He paced his office, the city lights twinkling outside, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within him. His sleek BMW 7 Series, usually a symbol of his unshakable control, now felt like a cage. He ran a hand through his slicked-back hair, the black rose tattoo on his neck a stark reminder of the family's dark legacy. Sophie, unknowingly, had become a pawn in a game far older and more dangerous than she could comprehend. Her very existence was a challenge to the established order, a living question mark over the Vitale family's carefully constructed narrative. Marco knew he couldn't simply dismiss her. The code of honor, however twisted it might be in their world, demanded he acknowledge his brother's child. But doing so openly would invite scrutiny, suspicion, and potentially a bloody power struggle. He had to make a difficult decision, one that balanced his personal connection to his brother's memory with the ruthless demands of his position. Protecting Sophie meant exposing the truth, which could lead to chaos. Ignoring her meant betraying his own blood, a transgression that would haunt him. The stakes were incredibly high. Rival families, always lurking in the shadows, would seize upon any sign of weakness, any internal strife, to launch their own assaults. Marco's lieutenants, fiercely loyal but pragmatic, would question his judgment if he allowed sentiment to cloud his decisions. He had to navigate this treacherous landscape with extreme caution, protecting Sophie while simultaneously safeguarding his empire. The emotional weight of this revelation was immense. He had mourned his brother, carried the burden of his loss, only to discover it was all a carefully constructed deception. Now, the past was not just knocking, it was standing right in front of him, in the form of a determined young woman who carried his brother's eyes. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know what you think Marco should do next. The climax of the tension was almost unbearable. Marco sat back in his chair, the photograph still clutched in his hand, his gaze fixed on the face of the man he had believed dead for 20 years. The man in the picture, Antonio, his older brother, was undeniably there, his features a younger, softer version of Marco's own. The shock had given way to a cold, hard realization, a flood of memories from a childhood he had tried to bury. He remembered Antonio's rebellious spirit, his fierce independence, and the bitter arguments with their father, the former boss, who had demanded absolute obedience. Antonio had wanted out, a life free from the family's dark grip, a dream that had ultimately led to his supposed demise. Marco had been told it was an accident, a tragic consequence of a life lived too fast. Now he knew it was a lie, a carefully orchestrated disappearance to protect the family's image and consolidate power. Sophie watched him, her own emotions a tumultuous mix of hope and fear. She saw the vulnerability in his eyes, a raw, unguarded look that contradicted his formidable reputation. The mob boss, the man who commanded respect and fear, was suddenly just a man, grappling with a profound personal betrayal. He was my brother, Marco finally said, his voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. Antonio. I was told he died. A car accident, they said. His eyes met Sophie's, a silent apology for the years of deception, a shared burden of a past neither of them had chosen. The weight of this recognition was immense, threatening to crush him. He had built his empire on the ashes of his brother's memory, believing himself to be the rightful heir, the one who had stepped up when Antonio had supposedly fallen. Now, that foundation felt like quicksand. The consequences of this revelation weighed heavily on him. If Antonio was alive, or had been alive long enough to father Sophie, then the entire narrative of his succession was a lie. The old guard, those who had been loyal to his father, would see this as a weakness, a crack in his armor. The rival families, always eager to exploit any vulnerability, would pounce. His own men, who had sworn allegiance to him, might question his legitimacy. The code of honor, so central to their world, was being tested in the most personal way possible. He had to protect Sophie, his niece, his brother's legacy, but doing so could mean exposing the family's deepest secrets, risking a bloody war that could dismantle everything he had worked for. His mind raced, calculating the risks, weighing the options. The sleek laptop on his desk, usually a tool for managing his vast operations, now seemed irrelevant. His Armani suit felt constricting, a uniform of a life that was suddenly in question. He had always prided himself on his control, his ability to anticipate every move, but this was an unforeseen variable, a ghost from the past that had returned to haunt him. The vulnerability he displayed was a rare sight, a testament to the profound impact of Sophie's simple photograph. He was no longer just Marco Vitale, the mob boss. He was a brother, a nephew, a man confronted with a truth that threatened to redefine his entire existence. The city outside, once a symbol of his power, now seemed to mock his sudden helplessness, its endless lights a reminder of the vast, uncontrollable forces at play. The shocking revelation came not from the photograph itself, but from the subsequent investigation Marco initiated. He had immediately dispatched his most trusted men, utilizing his vast network and cutting-edge technology, encrypted communications, satellite tracking, and deep web searches, to uncover the truth about Antonio. What they found was a meticulously constructed new identity, a life lived in the shadows, far from the reach of the Vitale family. Antonio hadn't died in an accident. He had faked his death with the help of a rogue faction within the family, a group disillusioned with the old boss's brutal methods. He had wanted to escape, to build a normal life, free from the violence and the endless cycle of revenge. He had succeeded, for a time, raising Sophie with her mother, a woman he had met outside their world. The true twist, however, was that Antonio had been murdered just a few years prior, not by a rival family, but by the very faction that had helped him disappear. They had grown resentful, feeling betrayed by his abandonment, and had silenced him to prevent any future complications for their own burgeoning illicit operations. Sophie's mother had died shortly after, leaving Sophie an orphan, unaware of her true heritage. This revelation sent shockwaves through Marco. His brother hadn't just disappeared, he had been betrayed and murdered by those who were supposed to be allies, a betrayal that had been covered up by his own father to maintain stability. The code of honor, which Marco held so dear, had been utterly desecrated. His father, the man he had revered, had allowed his own son's murder to go unpunished, all for the sake of power. Emotions were at their peak. Marco felt a searing rage, a profound sense of injustice, and a deep, aching sorrow for the brother he had lost twice over. The impossible romance that had seemed to blossom between him and Sophie, a silent, undeniable pull, was now complicated by the weight of this shared, tragic past. She was his niece, the daughter of a brother whose life had been stolen. His code of honor was tested to its absolute limit. Could he avenge his brother, expose the truth, and risk tearing his family apart? Or could he maintain the fragile peace, protect Sophie, and live with the knowledge of his father's complicity? The choice was agonizing, a moral dilemma that threatened to consume him. The dramatic change in their situation was profound. Sophie was no longer just an orphan seeking answers. She was the last living link to a deeply buried secret, a symbol of a past betrayal that demanded justice. Marco, the unshakable mob boss, was now a man torn between loyalty to his family's legacy and the burning need to avenge his brother and protect his niece. The sleek, modern technology that had helped uncover the truth now felt like a double-edged sword, revealing a past that was both liberating and devastating. The very foundations of his world had shifted, and he knew that whatever decision he made, there would be no going back. The Vitale name, once a symbol of unwavering power, was now stained with a deeper, more personal tragedy, and Marco was left to pick up the pieces. The resolution of the main story arc was not one of simple triumph, but of profound sacrifice and a redefinition of honor. Marco, after days of agonizing deliberation, made his choice. He could not, in good conscience, allow his brother's murderers to go unpunished, nor could he allow Sophie to remain in the dark, a pawn in a game she didn't understand. He convened a meeting of the family's most trusted capos, not in his opulent office, but in a secluded, heavily guarded warehouse on the outskirts of Brooklyn, a place where old scores were settled and new alliances forged. The air was thick with anticipation, the men, hardened veterans of the streets, sensing the gravity of the moment. Marco, dressed in a simple black suit, his face grim, laid out the truth: Antonio's faked death, his new life, and his ultimate betrayal and murder by the rogue faction. The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. The old guard, those who remembered Antonio, were stunned. The younger capos, who had only known the legend of the lost brother, listened in stunned silence. Marco then presented irrefutable evidence, gathered through his extensive network and advanced surveillance, implicating the faction responsible. He spoke not with anger, but with a cold, unwavering resolve, emphasizing the desecration of their code, the betrayal of blood. The consequences of his actions were clear: a bloody internal conflict, a purging of the traitors, and a period of instability for the Vitale family. But Marco argued that true honor lay not in maintaining a false peace, but in upholding justice, even when it meant tearing down the very foundations of their past. The ensuing conflict was swift and brutal, a necessary cleansing that solidified Marco's authority while simultaneously redefining it. He proved himself not just a ruthless leader, but a man of principle, willing to sacrifice stability for justice. Sophie, though kept safe and shielded from the direct violence, was informed of the truth, of her father's life and tragic end. Marco established a trust for her, ensuring her financial security and offering her a place within the family's legitimate businesses, should she choose it. He couldn't bring her father back, but he could honor his memory and protect his daughter. The impossible romance between them, born from shared tragedy, transformed into a deep, familial bond, a quiet understanding that transcended their initial attraction. The sacrifices were immense. Marco lost some of his most trusted men in the conflict, and the Vitale family endured a period of intense scrutiny and internal restructuring. But from the ashes of betrayal, a new order emerged, one built on a foundation of truth and a renewed, albeit darker, sense of honor. Marco, now more formidable than ever, carried the weight of his choices, forever changed by the orphan who handed him a photograph. He had avenged his brother, protected his niece, and solidified his reign, but at a cost that would forever mark his soul. The city, with its endless hum, continued its relentless pace, but for Marco and Sophie, their world had been irrevocably altered, bound by a secret that had finally come to light. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. And so, my darlings, we come to the end of The Orphan's Secret. What a journey it has been, hasn't it? From the moment Sophie Chen placed that faded photograph on Marco Vitale's desk, their lives, and indeed the very fabric of the Vitale Empire, were irrevocably altered. This story isn't just about a mob boss and an orphan. It's about the enduring power of truth, the complex nature of family, and the heavy price of honor. Marco Vitale, a man forged in the fires of power and ruthlessness, was forced to confront his deepest vulnerabilities, to choose between the comfortable lie of his past and the painful, yet necessary truth. He chose justice, he chose family, and in doing so, he redefined what it meant to be a leader in his world. Sophie, the determined orphan, found not just answers, but a connection, a family she never knew she had, albeit one steeped in danger and dark secrets. Her courage in seeking the truth ultimately brought about a reckoning that had been decades in the making. The legacy of Antonio Vitale, the brother who sought freedom, was finally honored, his memory avenged by the very family he had tried to escape. This tale reminds us that even in the darkest corners of society, where loyalty is tested and betrayal lurks, the bonds of blood and the pursuit of truth can shatter even the most carefully constructed facades. It's a testament to the idea that some secrets, no matter how deeply buried, will always find a way to surface, demanding to be heard, demanding justice. I hope this story resonated with you, stirring your emotions and making you ponder the intricate dance between fate and choice. It's a narrative that lingers, a testament to the human spirit's capacity for both immense cruelty and profound love. What did you think of Marco's choice? Was it the right one? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep seeking those untold stories. Goodbye for now, my darlings.